Have you ever walked down a dark, empty street in the middle of the night and felt something following you? You couldn't hear it. You couldn't see it. But you knew it was there. A strange weight pressing against your chest, a cold breath trailing down your spine, an invisible force that whispered a single question you couldn't silence. What if I never mattered to them? That thought slices through your mind like a blade made of silence. And right there, without warning, you realize something terrifying. It wasn't love. It was addiction. But not just any addiction. It was the kind that lives in the shadows of your past, a chemical hunger for recognition, from someone who never truly saw you, someone who could walk past you like a ghost and still haunt your entire world. You didn't love them. You were addicted to the idea of becoming enough for someone who was never willing to choose you. And now, I want to ask you something. Why do you keep chasing the ones who don't need you? Why does coldness make your heart beat faster than kindness ever could? Why does distance make you fall deeper than affection? The answer isn't about them. It never was. The answer is you. The most dangerous part of emotional addiction is that it wears the mask of love. It doesn't come with a warning. It doesn't feel toxic at first. It feels electric, intoxicating, like fate disguised as coincidence. But it's not love. It's survival dressed in longing. You're not addicted to the person. You're addicted to the pursuit, the uncertainty, the craving for just one moment of clarity in the chaos they bring. Because when someone gives you nothing and then suddenly gives you something, your brain lights up like a drug just hit your bloodstream. That hit, it's dopamine, the same chemical that makes people addicted to gambling, sugar, porn. Now becomes the reason you can't stop checking your phone, can't stop replaying every word, every glance, every silence. And here's the worst part: you don't realize it's happening, because it doesn't feel like a game. It feels personal. Like if you try hard enough, if you wait long enough, they'll finally choose you. But that's the lie. What you're chasing isn't love. It's emotional reinforcement, intermittent, inconsistent, and devastatingly addictive. One moment they vanish. The next, they give you a look, a reply, a compliment, and your entire body melts. You feel alive again, seen, worthy, but it doesn't last, because they disappear again. And your system, already wired for lack, panics. It needs another fix. So you chase, not because you want to, but because not chasing feels like death. Your nervous system doesn't want safety. It wants familiarity. And if chaos is what you grew up with, chaos is what feels like home. That's why when someone treats you with calm, consistency, presence, it feels off, boring, suspicious. Because your brain was trained to equate love with pain, affection with tension, and desire with absence. That training didn't come from nowhere. It came from wounds, from early patterns where your worth was tied to performance, where you had to earn affection, where silence meant you weren't good enough. So now, when someone ignores you, you don't walk away. You try harder. You bend. You shrink. You ache for their attention like oxygen. But what you're really aching for is yourself. The self you abandoned in the process of trying to be enough for someone who was never capable of seeing your value. And the tragedy is, the more you try to prove it to them, the further you drift from the one person who truly needs your love yourself. That's the psychology of emotional addiction. It doesn't ask, do they love me? It screams, how do I make them love me? And in that question, you lose yourself. Memory is not a recording. It's a reconstruction. a selective storyteller that edits the truth to protect your pain. That's why, when someone leaves you empty, your mind doesn't always recall the silence. It remembers the spark, the rush, the rare, fragile moments of attention that made your heart believe, maybe this is real, maybe this means something. But it didn't. Not really. What your memory does is distort the story. It turns crumbs into feasts. It takes emotional starvation and paints it as passion. And without knowing, you start to romanticize what once hurt you. You say, they weren't that bad. You think, maybe I overreacted. You tell yourself, it was complicated. But deep down, you remember crying alone in your room. You remember overanalyzing every delay in their reply. You remember losing sleep, losing focus, losing pieces of yourself, just to feel like you mattered. And yet, nostalgia creeps in. Not because the past was beautiful, but because your heart still longs for what you hoped it could have been. That's the most dangerous part. You don't miss the person. You miss the fantasy, the illusion of healing through their affection, the idea that if they changed or came back or finally saw you, then everything broken in you would make sense. But that day never comes because the version of them that lives in your memory doesn't exist. They weren't sent to fix you. They weren't capable of holding what you carried. You projected a role onto them, a mirror, a wish, a second chance for the first wound that was never healed. And when they didn't fulfill that script, your mind didn't grieve them. It grieved the loss of what you imagined. And here's where the self-manipulation begins. You go back not because it was good, but because the unknown feels worse than the familiar pain. You replay old texts. You scroll through pictures. You write messages and delete them, not to connect, but to relive. Because reliving pain is easier than sitting in silence. Because silence feels like abandonment. Like nothingness. Like you never mattered to them. And maybe you never mattered to anyone. But that's the lie. That's the voice of the addiction. The voice that says, text them, just to see how they are. The voice that pretends it's curiosity, but it's not. It's a relapse, a craving for the rush, for the hit, for the fix. And if you give in, you'll spiral. Again. Because the outcome will never change. You already know how the story ends. You've read this chapter too many times. And yet, you still turn the page. That's the power of nostalgia born from trauma. It doesn't remind you of what was. It reminds you of what never happened, but what you desperately wanted to happen. And the longer you stay in that illusion, the longer you delay your healing. Because true healing only begins when you stop chasing ghosts and start facing your own reflection. There comes a moment quiet but violent when you realize it was never about them, not their silence, not their approval, not their return. It was about you, needing something outside of you to validate what you never learned to hold within. And here's the hardest truth of all. You didn't chase them because they were special. You chased them because your wounded self saw in them a chance to feel whole, not loved, seen, chosen, enough. You turned them into a mirror, hoping their recognition would fix every rejection you never got to make sense of. But they weren't your healer. They were your trigger. And as long as your sense of worth depends on someone choosing you, they will always hold the power. That's not connection. That's captivity. And that cycle will repeat itself, new face, same pattern, until you break it at the root. Because healing doesn't happen when someone new loves you. Healing begins when you stop needing love to prove you're not broken. And to do that, you must rewire everything. You must look at what your body calls attraction and learn to question it. Because sometimes that spark you feel in the first 5 minutes isn't chemistry. It's recognition. Not soul to soul, but wound to wound. Your chaos sensing their chaos. Your abandonment sensing their distance. And it feels familiar. It feels magnetic. But it's not real. It's a trap disguised as fate. A reenactment of an old story. Hoping this time it ends differently. But it won't. Because stories don't change until you do. That's why real healing starts with suspicion of your own impulses. When someone makes your heart race but leaves your gut uneasy, pause. When someone makes you feel high but not safe, question it. Because love is not adrenaline. Love is not the chase. Love is not intensity dressed as passion. Love is calm, consistent, steady. And if your nervous system is addicted to chaos, that kind of love will feel wrong, boring, maybe even repulsive. But that feeling isn't truth. It's programming. Your old threshold's still running the show. That's why rewiring hurts. Because you have to say no to what feels exciting and yes to what feels unfamiliar. You have to choose safety over sparks, presence over promises. You have to learn how to sit with peace without calling it emptiness. You have to stop interpreting stability as disinterest, and that takes practice, repetition, patience. But over time, your nervous system recalibrates, and suddenly, love that feels calm won't feel dull. It'll feel like home, not the home you came from, the home you never had. And you'll stop chasing those who disappear, not because you've hardened, but because your soul is no longer starving. You'll stop trying to earn love, because you've finally remembered you were born worthy of it. And from that place, everything changes. You stop begging. You stop proving. You stop waiting for someone to save you. You become the one who no longer abandons yourself. Real healing begins when you stop begging for doors to open that were never meant for you. When you no longer try to convince someone to see your worth because you've already seen it yourself. You're not here to chase people who can't hold you. You're not here to audition for love that forgets your name the moment it gets bored. You are here to come home to the part of you that you abandoned trying to be chosen. That is your real work. Not chasing, not proving, but returning to yourself. And when you finally stop running, when you finally stop rewriting old wounds into new romances, something powerful happens. Silence enters. Not the kind that screams of emptiness, but the kind that feels like peace. At first, it might scare you. You'll want to fill it. Call them. Text them. Replay the past like a broken film. But that impulse is not love. It's withdrawal. It's your system craving a hit of the pain it confused for passion. And if you resist that craving long enough, you'll start to see clearly. You'll see that the person you obsessed over was never your soulmate. They were your mirror. A reflection of the part of you that believed you had to suffer to be worthy of love, but you don't. You never did. You were just taught that love had to hurt, to mean something. That if you didn't fight for it, bleed for it, beg for it, it wasn't real. But now you know. That belief was a lie, a script written by pain, and now you get to rewrite it. You get to choose something different. You get to define love as something that stays, that softens, that heals. You get to stop offering yourself to people who only see you when it's convenient. You get to stop building altars where there should be boundaries. And if no one told you yet, let me say it now. You were never made to beg for emotional crumbs. You were made to stand in your truth, fully, unapologetically, silently, if you must, but with power. Not the kind that demands, the kind that doesn't need to, the kind that walks away with dignity when someone can't meet you. That is real strength. That is real love. And here's the most important thing to remember. The love you're searching for won't come while you're chasing what hurt you. It will only arrive when you stop betraying yourself to feel wanted, because love doesn't bloom in desperation. It grows in integrity, in truth, in wholeness. And you, yes, you are already whole. You just forgot. And now, it's time to remember. Time to let go. Not for them, for you. Time to close the door. Not because they don't deserve another chance, but because you finally do. Time to stop asking, what did I do wrong? And start asking, what can I do right for me? So if you've listened this far, if something inside you is trembling but awake, then leave behind the illusion, the ghost, the story that kept you small, and hold on to one truth, clear, simple, and final. My worth isn't in being chosen. It's in knowing when to stop offering myself. Say it, feel it, own it, and when you're ready, let them go. And return to the one place you've always belonged, back to yourself. If you've made it this far, then something inside you has shifted, something quiet but irreversible. And now, I want you to mark that moment, not for me, for yourself. Go to the comments and leave one sentence. I no longer chase shadows. Say it like a promise. Say it like a declaration. Say it because you're done abandoning yourself just to feel seen. Say it because you've awakened. Because this was never just a video. This was a mirror that asked you to stop running, a mirror that dared you, to stay. You didn't come here to escape. You came here to uncover, to face what you've avoided, and what comes next may not hurt less. But now, it will hurt with purpose. It will hurt with clarity. And eventually, it won't hurt at all. You're no longer chasing what turns away. You're walking toward what finally stays. So pause. Breathe. Don't speak. Don't scroll. Just sit in the silence. No music. No noise. Just stillness, just you and your reflection, waiting.